All right, peace and blessings, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody's having a good week. Back with another one. Um, I would say you see the title of the video, but I don't even know what I'm gonna name the title of the video. I know what we're gonna talk about though. We're gonna talk about once again. We're gonna address one of those topics that a lot of people don't really talk about this. Even if they don't talk about it, they really don't talk about it from this perspective. So we're gonna kind of address that. That thing is going to be um, the what's called in history the Khasut, right? Or the kings of Khasut. And as it would turn out, like we said in previous videos, Khasut is a city that was founded circa 3000 BC in the Delta. It's a real important city likened unto Thebes. I think Memphis and Thebes were also founded around 3000 BC. So that was a um, significant year, significant time, whatever the case may be. But um, yeah, we're going to get into all of that. We're basically going to get into how we talked about in previous books. We're going to get into some of this Cults of Shadow by Kenneth Grant. We're going to kind of touch on some of that. And I'm going to get into this from Crete to Egypt, missing links of the Rig Veda. And we're going to get into some of this. I know I made a previous video about Hyksos, Mycenaeans, and all that. We're gonna go a lot more in detail about this. We're gonna go into we're gonna add on to a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about in previous videos, right? So let's just do a recap real quick about some of the stuff that we spoke about in previous videos, and then we'll go forward from there. All right. Okay, recap. Okay, ancient Ethiopia, right? When we say ancient Ethiopia, that's not the kingdom of Aksum. That's prior to the kingdom of Aksum, and we're talking about ancient Ethiopia, East and West Ethiopia, right? When we say Western Ethiopia, we're talking about Africa. When we say Eastern Ethiopia, we're talking about India. The dividing point, or the dividing line between that would be the Red Sea, and we have Arabia as Ethiopia proper. So when Nation of Islam talks about the Asiatic black man, we're talking about the black man of Western Asia, right? So when we talk about Ethiopia, okay, so that's what we're talking about. We talk about ancient Ethiopia prior to Aksum. Okay, so Ethiopia, as we've discussed on previous videos, ancient Ethiopia, what we're talking about is a collection of civilizations with the common factor being the worship of a mother and child god, right? Okay, so that's the common factor of all these various civilizations, and we're gonna go into the civilizations that we're talking about, but we're gonna but that's the common factor. Okay, Ethiopia, right? Contrary to its popular etymology and the popular notion, Ethiopia has nothing to do, or Ethiops or Ethiopian, that name has nothing to do with burnt faces. That's a misnomer, right? So Ethiopia is from Ath and Ophion, right? Ath, as in Athens, as in Athena, as in Anath. You see what I'm saying? Those are all deities, all female deities. You see what I'm saying? Ath, the female deity. Ophion is a male deity. Ophion is a deity that syncretizes with Uranus. You have Ophion in Arutami in the Pelagian creation story, and we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the Pelagians. The Pelagians are Ethiopians that inhabited Europe prior to the Hellenistic Greeks, right? So you have Ath and Ophion. Okay, Ophion in Arunami in Pelagian mythology, so-called, is equal to Soot and Typhon in Egypto-Nubian mythology, right? Okay, so some of the civilizations that we were just talking about, right? So we gonna get into it. Some of the civilizations, the Ethiopian civilizations, and again we said Ethiopian. So we're dealing with their religion, their worship of mother and child. So we're dealing with Ethiopian civilizations such as Kush, Nubia, Egypt, Canaanite Phoenicia. Um, I know some of y'all might be like, you doubling up on names, however it may go, but I'm just trying to cover all the bases. Cush, Nubia, Egypt, Canaanite, Phoenician, um, Pelasgians, Dravidians, Chaldeans, Minoans, Mycenaeans, and the original Celts. All of these, if you and you can go back, and we kind of unfolded all that on the previous videos. You can go back into the previous videos, and we kind of unfolded what we talking about when we say Ethiopian and their religion and everything like that, that made that distinction or what have you. However, over time in the ancient world, it did become a racial distinction because, again, that misnomer is Ethiopian means burnt faces or what have you. Okay, so specifically, the two groups of Ethiopians that we're going to discuss here are going to be your Pelasgians. Your Pelasgians are going to be your Ethiopians that resided in Europe prior to the Hellenistic Greeks. And we're going to get into some time frames as well. Okay, so we're going to deal with the Pelasgians and the Xoite Egyptians from the Delta region. This city that was founded in 3000 BC that we're talking about, the Xoites, or as the Egyptians called it, Khasut. You see what I'm saying? Because people often suggest that the Hyksos are foreign rulers, and we're gonna get into the understanding of how they even came to that conclusion as well, or some of the reasons why they might have came to that conclusion as well. Okay, so let's see here. Let's get into some time frames for Greece, right? Okay, so when we get into the Hellenistic Greeks, we get from circa 700 BC, and these are all roundabout numbers. So y'all don't beat me up about the numbers or whatever. This is all like this is internet right here. This is all internet right here. So y'all don't beat me up about the dates and all this stuff like that if it's not exact to y'all understand it. But y'all get my point. We're just trying to create a benchmark so we can so we can flow through this thing. Okay, so we got the Hellenistic Greeks. That's circa 700 BC. We talk about that a lot. Circa 700 BC when Hesiod writes the Theogony to 323 BC when Alexander the Greek dies. Okay, we also gonna get into why Alexander the Greek or Alexander the Great came into Egypt and he was just able to just assume power like that or whatever. Why he felt like he could even do that, and because he's a Greek and we're gonna get into who the Greeks are and why that's even relevant. Because we're not talking about Hellenistic Greeks. We're talking about these Pelasgians or whatever, who are Ethiopians, just like Nubians and Egyptians are Ethiopians. Can you dig it? Okay, so Hellenistic Greeks, circa 700 BC to 323 BC. Okay, you have the Greek Dark Ages. Okay, that's 1200 BC to 800 BC. So 800 BC is the end of the Greek Dark Ages, right? So circa 700 BC, that's when Hesiod writes the Theogony. If you read about the Greek Dark Ages from this period of time, there's no writing because your Minoan and your Mycenaean civilizations fell. Um, um, due to some events, some people say a volcanic eruption, various different theories or what have you, but it's a transition from your Bronze Age and all that stuff like that. The ages are changing as far as the whole Greek thing is concerned or whatever. But we're dealing with the Greek Dark Ages from circa 1200 BC to 800 BC. Okay, so prior to the Greek Dark Ages, so your Hellenes are on the other side of the Greek Dark Ages. So when I say 700 BC, that's after the Greek Dark Ages. People are starting to write again and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? Um, okay, you go through your Greek Dark Ages. Okay, so so something happens around 1200 BC, right? 1100, 1200 BC. That's this event or whatever that happens that causes problems for the Mycenaeans and Minoans. So your Minoan civilization, circa 5000 BC, right, to 1100 BC, okay? Mycenaean civilization, circa 1700 BC to 1100 BC, right? Pelagians. Remember we were talking about Solon. He's going to the priest of Socius and asking them questions about things. Solon is Plato's great grandfather, I think. He's asking the priest of Socius questions about the ancient world or whatever, and the priest of science tell them, man, your Greeks don't know nothing. Y'all don't even know the history of the land that y'all reside. Y'all don't even know the history of the Pelasgians that resided there before you. Okay, you talk about the Pelasgians. The Pelasgians, if you look that up, they have varying dates for it. They really don't know when they got there or whatever case may be. They're considered to be, these European Ethiopians, because like in a previous video, we talked about the migration patterns of the Twa. The Twa are in Europe like 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. You see what I'm saying? So as far as the Pelagians, which like I said before, is an amalgamation of African tribes that came up in settled Europe or whatever case may be, they really don't know when they got there. The Pelagians are the ones who, in your mythology, Perseus is a Pelagian, Hercules, all these guys are Pelagians and everything like that. The guys who founded Attica and Athens, like Ophian, like we talked about before, Athens and everything like that. The people built Attica and everything like that. These are all your Pelagians. So they consider to be prehistoric people or whatever case may be. Okay, moving right along. Just giving you the dates. So we getting 700 BC to 323 BC. So starting 700 BC, that's when you get your classical Hellenistic Greeks. Prior to that is all these Ethiopians that we're talking about, right? Prior to all that is Ethiopians. Remember we said Greek mythology is Phoenician, Ethiopian mythology and everything like that. Zeus is Zeus, Ethiops. Remember we said that? Okay, so we're going to keep moving along. Okay, the Isle of Crete was settled by Minoans circa 5000 BC. Okay, so all right, so we just kind of like covering our basis as far as this whole Greek thing. So that's Greece. So what we said, the two Ethiopians that we're gonna be dealing with is the Pelasgians, and we're gonna be dealing with the Xoites. So that's the scope of time we're dealing with the Pelasgians and everything like that. So let's talk about these Xoites. Okay, uh, we call them Xoites. That's what the Greeks called them. You see what I'm saying? They're called they're from a place called Khasut. You see what I'm saying? Um, so what history calls the Hyksos were kings of a city called Xois or Khasut, right? It was founded around 3000 BC. I think we said that it was likened unto Thebes, right? The Hyksos, right? To put it in perspective, the Hyksos, um, they ruled Egypt for around 1,000 years, circa 1638 BC to 1530 BC. Okay, so that's from the 14th to the 16th dynasty. The Hyksos were also Typhonian Ethiopian because we just talked about what that is. Because the Hyksos, don't they worship the mother and child? Don't they worship Satuk? Ain't Satuk? Don't Satuk tie into Typhon? You see what I'm saying? So they were Typhonians as well. So let's see here. And there was a long relationship between the Pelasgians and the Zoite pharaohs. So we're gonna get into that as we keep pressing on in this. So we're gonna get into all right, so we're gonna get into this Kenneth Grant real quick. This Cults of Shadow. We're gonna go to, let's see here, page 58. All right. Page 58. It's in the middle of the page. Anybody who got the book, y'all want to read along. The continuous and murderous antagonism between the cult of Set and the later solar cults of Osiris and Amun, who represented the Father in heaven, as man represented the Father upon earth, resulted in Egypt's gradual dissolution. Now, we talk about this all the time in these videos, like um, in Gerald Massey's Ancient Egypt Light of the World, he lists 4 phases that Egypt goes through: Sabaean phase, lunar phase, solar lunar phase, and the final phase being the solar phase and everything like that. And he talks about these are 4 phases of their culture that's reflected in their deities and basically the orientation of their religion, everything or whatever case may be. So he says to truly understand Egypt, you have to understand those 4 phases. So that's what they're talking about. The Sabian, Typhonian phase, or whatever case may be, which was later supplanted by the lunar phase and later the solar cults and stuff like that, of Osiris and all that, and Ray and everything like that. So that's what we're getting into. Okay, so let's see. Gerald Massey has shown that the record of strife and bloodshed caused by the initial rift in the earliest religious consciousness of humanity, resulting in the total silence of history concerning those dynasties in which the Typhonians held supreme sway. Massey further demonstrates that the so-called shepherd kings were not, in fact, alien rulers. Okay, the shepherd kings were not, in fact, alien rulers, but indigenous inherents of this most ancient cult. What did we just say? They were Sabaean Typhonians, which the later Solarites abhorred for their bestial practice and godless rites. The Draconians in its beginning had appeared in Egypt at a period anterior to Mena by 13,420 years, nor did its influence cease with the rise of the dynasty of Mena. They're talking about the first dynasty. So these are so this whole idea of serpent worship, like we talking about this phase that we talking about, is this bleeds into your whole pre-dynastic period or whatever case may be. Matter of fact, majority of your pre-dynastic period deals with this. Okay. Um, Although during the centuries that ensued, the Osirians gradually gained the upper hand and suppressed the rival cult, it was not until the sixth dynasty that the Draconians again became predominant. From then until the ninth dynasty, a great chunk seems to have been bitten out of the historical records of blank due to the avenging Osirians, who in the uh, ninth dynasty methodically destroyed every trace of monumental and otherwise of their rivals. It is not until the reign of Queen Sebek Neferu at the beginning of the 13th dynasty that the Draconians again returned to full force. This queen was an initiate of the most profound mysteries of the cult, and her temperament was such that she reveled in assuming the role of great mother, because again, like how we talking about the Ethiopians, how they got a mother and child cult going on, the Madonna and child thing originated with this whole idea here. The commencement of her reign marked also the commencement of the 13th dynasty. It was known as the Sebek dynasty because at this time, after a period of 2,150 years, the sun began to rise in the sign of the ram, the vernal color, having passed the sun, the sign of Taurus into that of Aries, the place of rising of the sun, the time of the vernal equinox determined its god form, and the constellation of the ram, which constituted the birthplace at the beginning of the 13th dynasty, supplied the zoomorphic symbol of the sun, or sun, S-O-N, of the mother in her form of infinite space, the sky. The Sabaean form of Set as Sebek that had been represented as the draconian image of the crocodile worshipped in the Fayum was now continued in the form of the ram-headed Sebek Ab Ra. Ab, remember how we were talking about Ab and Ab and Af and tying back into Ophidian. Sebek Ab Ra, meaning the lamb or ram of Ra, was nominal terminal used by the Sebek devotees of Sebek of the 13th dynasty. Abra means literally the lamb or ram, Ab, of the sun, Ra. It implied that the bearer of the suffix was a devotee of Sebek, the son of the goddess of the seven stars. All right, we're still in cults of shadow. Okay, it was during the reign of Queen Sebek Neferu that the draconian cult attained its maximum power. During the ensuing four dynasties, it developed its magical doctrines along the lines that were later to appear in Asia in tantric form. The temporal power of the cult, however, declined in the termination of the 17th dynasty. Its power was extinguished when King Apophis was overcome by the Osirian forces led by Aphmos, a captain general of Marines under the first king, also named Aphmos, of the 18th dynasty. The question poses itself as to why the Typhonians clung to the worship of the mother and child in the face of devastating opposition. So remember the mother and child thing we've been talking about. Okay, in the face of devastating opposition from those who had developed their religious ideas in accordance with later and more accurate astronomical observations and the more accurate knowledge of physiology that accompanied the establishment in society of individualized paternity. This development was apparent only because although the Osirians and Ammonites were responsible for reforming society on the basis of fatherhood, this did not in any way change the profoundly complex magical processes enacted with the sexual energies, and these processes were real cause of the constant persecution of the Draconians suffered at the hands of the Ammonites, and the so-called bestial practices with which the Draconians were charged laid the foundational mysteries of the magical formula, and the Sabaean mode of representing these mysteries had no more connection with the reckoning of time by the motions of the stars than had the solar worship of the Osirians any direct connection with the role of the male in the process of procreation. The priests alone of the rival factions were fully aware of the differences that were fundamental in either cases, differences that concerned the mode of applying specific physiological formula for the incarnation or materialization of extraterrestrial beings, which, as already stated, has ever been the aim of magical cults. These differences, okay, this is one of the main punchlines for reading this. Okay, these differences are thrown into sharpest relief in the Asiatic tantras. Okay, so they got to Asia some kind of way. In the Asiatic tantras, which their divisions into the left hand path, which exalts the feminine principle, and the right hand path, which allots supremacy to the male. The overthrow of the Typhonians, peep this, the overthrow of the Typhonians in Egypt, however, was anything but complete in the sense that it destroyed the cult or its mysteries. It is true that it wiped them from the face of the land, but as previously noted, numerous waves of Draconians throughout the centuries left Egypt and spawned the cult far and wide, so that it is traceable all over the globe in various stages, either of development or degeneration. In some cases, it flowered into strange cults that persist right down to modern times, but from the point of view of the official religion of Egypt, the Draconian cult failed to regain its ascendancy, although in the 26th dynasty an attempt was made to effect a revival. All right. Uh, okay, so we just did that little piece out of Cults of Shadow. And just to kind of, before we get into this, like I said, there's the relationship between the Zoite pharaohs, like how we just talked about. That's a whole thing. That's not just like some ragtag desert dwellers as it's made to seem. And those of the Typhonian current, the Hyksos are given credit for, let's say, like your intermediate periods, your 14th through the 16th dynasty and everything like that. But as you can see, is discussed in Cults of Shadows, um, they held sway back and forth, even in dynasties prior to your what would be considered as your classical Khasut, and even in dynasties after that. So you see what I'm saying? The Hyksos proper is not the only individuals who still had this same, um, I don't know, who basically were cut from the same cloth. These same people um, appear in various other dynasties or whatever case may be, but they're not called the Hyksos every time that they appear or whatever case may be, as we just saw when we read that little piece from Kenneth Grant. So eventually they get driven out, okay, and like it's been said before, and we're gonna kind of dive into this a little bit. When they were driven out, they went across the Levant, because what's not often discussed when we talk about the Hyksos is made to seem like this is just a ragtag, a band of desert dwellers and stuff like that, and they just took over some stuff haphazardly, and that's not really the case. As we're gonna see, there's a whole confederacy that's going on between your Pelasgians and your kings in the Delta. Potentially, your Pelasgians may have influenced this whole. They may have had influence as far as, you see what I'm saying, this whole city and everything like that, or Xoites and everything like that, or whatever case may be. It's a constant interplay back and forth between Pelagian Greece, the island of Crete, which is founded 5000 BC and everything like that. It's this constant interplay back and forth between them, the Nubians in the south, and even other places and kingdoms and stuff like that all throughout the Levant and everything like that. So basically what you get is a confederacy of sorts all throughout the north, or whatever case may be. We say that the Hyksos, from the Vedic perspective, they're the Ikshvaku dynasty and everything like that. Um, That's the first dynasty of the Bharat, or the first dynasty of India, so called. That's the dynasty, or that's the individuals. That's Ishvaku is the son of Manu, the ruler of the world. You see what I'm saying? So he's a big deal. You see what I'm saying? So these are not just a band of ragtag desert dwellers, like how they talk about. Even they talk about. We're gonna get into that. Sanskrit, the grammar for Sanskrit was created by a guy named Panini, and he didn't exist till about 400 BC. You see what I'm saying? Prior to that, they're saying that Sanskrit was a lot of oral traditions and things. Yeah, it was an oral tradition because these guys didn't just pop out of nowhere. They have a long tradition as a people from Xoites. You're gonna get into as we're gonna get into a lot of the deities that they worship, where they come from. You see what I'm saying? The certain suffixes and prefixes in words or whatever denote places that these people are from, or whatever case may be. And you'll ask yourself, why, how did this person make it into India? Yeah, because this is where these people are from originally. You see what I'm saying? They didn't start off in India. They came to India at some point. The Vedic Aryan, so called, and even the term Aryan, Ari, it comes from Kabari, the giants. We talked about that on the previous video. You see what I'm saying? The term Aryan comes from Ari, because the I and the Y are interchangeable. Kabari, like the giants. You see what I'm saying? We talk about the giants. We talk about polar mythology. Polar mythology goes with the whole Sabaean thing. You see what I'm saying? The Aryans that y'all talking about, they not Sabaean. Sabaean is Ethiopian. You get back to black people. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, in a Genesis, what they talking about, the Kabari, or the companion stars of the Big Dipper. It has nothing to do with nothing that y'all think that they talking about. That's all. That's Egyptian stuff that they talking about. So they're those people. They just went somewhere else. So we'll get into that. All right. Okay, so like I said, Panini creates the grammar for Sanskrit proper, 400 BC. But let's go back a little bit. Okay, we talking about how the Hyksos become the uh the Vedic people and stuff, like the Vedic Aryans and everything like that. So let's go back. Let's kind of give some dates real quick. Okay, so the Hittite Empire, right? Remember I said the Hittites and the Luwians. You see what I'm saying? Those are the first nations of Europeans that I've run across in my research. Okay, the Hittites 1600 BC to 1178 BC. The Luwians, circa 2000 BC to 800 BC. Now, those are going to be important groups of people or what have you, because the Luwians are going to be instrumental as far as writing the Vedas and everything like that. Okay, so the Rig Veda, the date that it's given. This is the date that it's given. This is the internet. Nobody get mad at me. The Rig Veda, the date that is given for the Rig Veda being written is between 1500 BC and 1100 BC. What did I say? The classical Hyksos, who history records as the Hyksos from the 14th to the 16th dynasty, that's 1638 BC to 1530 BC. Rig Veda was written from 1500 BC to 1100 BC. So that's around the same time. So we getting all these dates in place before we get into before we get into the literature, the bibliography, because we haven't even got into the bibliography yet. We gonna get into this real quick, but we just want to set this up. Okay, so your Rig Veda 1500 to 1100 BC. Your Athara Veda is 1100, 1000 BC to 800 BC. The Mahabharata 400 BC, and it's different versions of the Mahabharata. It's not just a one size fits all, but for the sake of this, 400 BC. Just trying to put a date on it. But Bhagavad Gita 400 BC. Ramayana 400 BC. In this book, she talks about Rama from the Ramayana is really Ramesses. It would make sense. Ramesses lived before that. This story comes long after that, so it would make sense if that was him. Okay, so the Ramayana is very different variations of the Ramayana. It's not just one size fits all. Different places have different variations of the Ramayana. I think it's hundreds of them, to be honest with you. But just to put a date on it, 400 BC. Okay, Upanishads from 700 BC to 300 BC. Okay, and like we said, Panini creates Sanskrit around 400 BC. So we just wanted to put some dates on this stuff just to have some context. So when I say that the Hyksos become the Vedic people and stuff like that, the Vedic Aryans and stuff like that, it's around the same time. It is around the time that your Rig Veda is written. All this stuff comes out or whatever case may be. So that's not a far, as far as the time is concerned, and all things considered, it's not a far fetched notion. Moving right along. Okay, so with no further ado, we're gonna get right into the proceedings this evening. I'm gonna be reading up out of this. You see what I'm saying? Now, that first little 30 minutes, I guess you could say, we just kind of recapping over a lot of what we'd already laid down on other videos. We're putting dates in place so we know the context of what we're dealing with. We understand how we flowing. You see what I'm saying? Even in this Hyksos period, you're dealing with the whole thing, the Osar self and all that. If you into the whole Yakub thing, the Hyksos pharaohs, all their names start with Jacob, Jacob Har, Jacob El, all that's sweet. That's all because Yakub is a metaphor. I don't subscribe to a big head scientist. I think that's a metaphor for somebody that probably took place around this time of what we talking about. You see what I'm saying? So we're gonna get into this. All right. I'm gonna start it off in the foreword, right? Just to kind of let you know what we're dealing with here. Okay. Um, and this is from Crete to Egypt, missing links to the Rig Veda by Dr. Liny Srinivasan. Okay, Dr. Liny Srinivasan traces these connections with the help of historical linguistics, tools like systematic changes that may have taken place during history of languages like Sanskrit, Greek, and hieroglyphic Egyptian. The toponomical names indicate some of the geographical regions that cover a large area from ancient Syria, Palestine to coast of Asia Minor, Egypt, and even to Ethiopia. That makes it possible to think of the time of the Hyksos rule of an empire extending from Egypt to Asia. Of an empire extended from Egypt to Asia. So these ain't just a ragtag group of desert dwellers. Okay. The Rig Veda authors may have been in Egypt. The Rig Veda written, pinned down 1500 BC. What we talking about? Circa around that time frame. Or the Rig Veda authors may have been in Egypt during the rules of the Hyksos foreign kings of Egypt. What? So okay, then we talk about the Ishvaku dynasty. That's who the Hyksos are from a Vedic perspective. Okay, aren't the Ishvaku dynasty? That's what's called the solar dynasty when they worship the sun or whatever case may be. Okay, so that's why we making some of those same correlations. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, shit. Okay, so we in the introduction. Okay, still in the beginning. The subject matter. This subject matter. This book introduces the reader to an unknown chapter of human history that was locked up so long in ancient Indian names. The history primarily belongs to the people who lived about 2 to 4,000 years ago in the region between the Mediterranean coast and the Jordan Valley. Those people can also be called Canaanites. I think we talked about who Canaanites are on a previous video. Canaanites, Phoenicians, and where they come from. Okay, Canaanites, a general biblical name of the people who were there before the Israelite occupation of the fertile valley of Jordan when it was called the Levant, like we've been talking about. Their territory, called Canaan, is attested to have been an ancient country in both the biblical and extra biblical sources. What? So before your biblical people got into what they call the land of Jordan, land of Canaan, and all that stuff like that, it was already ancient at that time. I think Narmer and them conquered the Levant in 3000 BC. It was already an ancient place at the time. It was located like a corridor between Mesopotamia and Egypt, right? So then we say that ancient Ethiopians, who was based out of Arabia, didn't they? Didn't they go all up and through there? Okay, the boundaries and extent of Canaan are unknown, but the newfound information shows that the influence of the Canaanites, people of Syria, Palestine, once spanned across the seas, reaching Egypt, Ethiopia, Western Asia, and the maritime kingdom of Crete, the seat of Minoan civilization, as they all interacted with each other. Okay, so this is basically the same thing with what we've been talking about, how all of the in the recap, how all of these civilizations were Ethiopians. They all had a common religion and stuff like that, and they all considered themselves pretty much the same thing. So let's keep going. All right. Rig Veda and toponymical names still in the introduction. Okay, in spite of the dramatized stories of the two epics and mythologicalized legends of the Purans, with you talking about the Purunas and Mahabharata, Ramayana, with Kuru, or the biblical core that is ancient Palestine and parts of Syria as their geographical foundation, it was very encouraging to match other names of the epic Puranas with names of other ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. For example, Kasi of the epic Puranas was traditionally held to be the same glorified kingdom Kasai of the Pali text, because Pali is one of the languages that Sanskrit comes from. In spite of the two different spellings, this made it easy to match Pali Kasai with Akkadian Kasi, a name of an ancient kingdom of Nubia or southeast Egypt. So basically, they matching a word out of the Purunas. You see what I'm saying? And they can relate it to a place in Nubia. You see what I'm saying? Um, and why would Sanskrit, if Sanskrit is completely original, why would it have roots of Akkadian in it? You see what I'm saying? What she's saying. This also made clear that Kasai of the Mahabharata was a Sanskrit, or rather a Sanskritized name of the same country. The great epic presents only the kings and princes of Kasi. Nevertheless, they were all related to the ancient Ethiopian kingdom. Even the thousand names of the three major gods in the Mahabharata were all made after the ancient Near Eastern places. Let's say that again. Even the thousand names of the three major gods in the Mahabharata, okay, were all made after the ancient Near Eastern place names. You see what I'm saying? So in the story of the Mahabharata, let's say like Vishnu will have various different appellations or various different titles to his name and stuff like that. When you look up places that mean those things, they're all in the Near East, is what she's saying. Okay, the ancient place names are usually hidden under their Sanskrit forms. Okay, this is how you find this stuff. A simple example of that would be Shiva's name, Virama. No one can imagine that it was a Sanskrit version of the Egyptian place biblical Pi Ram for Pi Ramesu, the magnificent city of Ramesses the Great. Right? So let's say no one a simple example of that will be Shiva's name. So this is a name of Shiva by Virama. Okay. No one can imagine that it was a Sanskrit version. So that being a Sanskrit word, it's a Sanskrit version of an Egyptian place. That's the city of Ramesses the Great. So why would they even have that in there? She shouldn't be able to do this, is what I'm saying. So basically, this is further proof that they left Egypt and took the stories and created a new language and put the stories in a different language. And that's how you get all this stuff. All these places and rivers and things that we can't find in India. Okay, moving right along. All right, still in the intro. Okay, this led to the finding that the tradition of toponymical names, that is the creation or composition of names compounding with the various types of place names, like that of cities, towns, kingdoms, and countries, came right down from the Rig Veda. Rig Veda, the oldest Hindu scripture, also contains the earliest written form of Indian names. Ancient Indian names and epithets containing a place name became extremely significant after the discovery that many Rig Veda names also coincide with ancient Near Eastern names of kingdoms, city-states, cities, towns, or countries. So why do names in the Rig Veda correspond with places in the Middle East, in the Near East, in the ancient Near East, excuse me. You see what I'm saying? Unless they took that information and they encoded it in Sanskrit. And we're gonna keep going. All right, still in the intro. The Rig Veda, a mythology. The Rig Veda, a mythology. Centuries before Indiologists identified the dialect of the Rig Veda, the oldest Hindu scripture contained an Indo-Aryan European dialect. However, that did not help to unlock its context and meaning of numerous words. The school of German Indiology presumed a mythological context partly based on linguistic conjectures and partly on selective use of scattered anecdotal and religious interpretations from the later Vedic text, that is, Samhitas, Brahmanas, and Sutras, which primarily deal with rituals performed by the past kings, the procedure of rituals, some mythological explanations, etc. They also named the chief priests officiating royal consecrations and official sacrifices. In brief, the goal of those authors was to prove that they were descendants of those Rig Veda priests. However, the mythological nature of the text defeated the Indianologists. For example, the coronation of Mahidra, the great Indra, to them was a myth, since Indra was a god. Comparison with the myth of Mahindra mountain of the Purunas with the Canaanite myth of Mount Sapan. That she talks about that in chapter 2, brings out that he was the first king of a race referred to here as pre-Greek Mycenaean. So that was the purpose of us getting into that timeline a little bit earlier or whatever, because she's going to use that terminology pre-Greek Mycenaean a lot. But I wanted to make the point earlier in the video that what she's talking about, whether she knows it or not, are Ethiopians. You see what I'm saying? Um, okay, who very early conquered Canaan and ruled that country from Kodesh in Lebanon. Okay, say that again. So the first king of a race referred to here as pre-Greek Mycenaean, who very early conquered Canaan and ruled. Man, we talk about the land of Canaan was an ancient land by the time the Israelites and all the people got there. Okay, so conquered Canaan and ruled the country from Kodesh in Lebanon. This is the key and pivotal information regarding the pre-biblical history of Canaan. The Rig Veda mythology is in fact an account of those kings disguised as gods. Let's say that again. The Rig Veda mythology is in fact an account of those kings disguised as gods. So what they talking about in the Rig Veda, they're talking about stuff that happened in the Near East. You see what I'm saying? So if anybody came down on Vermonters, it was the Egyptians and the Nubians and the Ethiopians that came down on Vermonters, because you just retelling their story in a different place, in a different language. So let's keep going. All right, still in Crete, from Crete to Egypt, missing links to the Rig Vedas, page 15. The heaven and the earths, the god Daius occurs frequently in the earlier part of the Rig Veda and mostly in the form of a compound Daiva Prithvi, Prithvi, Prithivi. I'm gonna butcher some words, man. Just, y'all bear with me. Meaning the heaven and the earth. The previous Indiologian interpretation of the term the universal parents does not make any sense in the newly discovered Near Eastern and particularly Egyptian context of the Rig Veda. Okay, the heaven and earth are also often spoken of as two halves and the two worlds. Okay, now let's get into this. Okay, which makes them comparable to the Egyptian Ta'u, literally two worlds. Didn't we say that when we were going into Celestial Ship of the North, and they were talking about in the Sabaean phase of the Egyptian culture or whatever, the North was dedicated to Tauret and the South was dedicated to her son. Ain't Tarseti the first nome of Egypt? See what I'm saying? Okay, but moving right along. Okay, the heaven and the earth are often spoken of as two halves and two worlds, which makes them comparable to the Egyptian Tauti, literally two worlds, but used to mean the two united kingdoms of Egypt, that is the Upper Egypt and the Lower Egypt. Apparently, in the Rig Veda, as in Egyptian, two worlds is being used as a name of Egypt. Now it makes sense why the two worlds are also called the two sisters. The two sisters were the two Egyptian goddesses Nechbet and Wadit, who in the symbol of the Ure used to decorate the forehead of the supreme Egyptian god Ra, as well as Ra's representative Pharaoh, or the forehead of the Egyptian kings. So he's talking about the god Dyaus. He's talking about she Dyaus. I know I'm butchering names, but basically what she's talking about is that's the Sanskritized version of the solar deity Ra. You see what I'm saying? All right, this is page 17. Okay, so a magnanimous Akkadian title, Anu U Antum. Sounds like Ethiopian kind of, don't it? But moving right along. A magnanimous Akkadian title, Anu U Antum, meaning Lord of the heaven and earth, have been applied to only a few little known foreign gods, such as Hurrian god Alala, Elamatic god Bilala, and Su god Dauru. Their titles signify them to be the kings of two Egypts. This book and the previous book of the author demonstrate that Egypt was twice under foreign confederation based on the mythological and Vedic names. One Asiatic centered in Nubia was by the Elamite Hurrians and Canaanites. This was conquered by a people akin to pre-Greeks who founded the Hyksos Empire. So, okay, wow, that's interesting. So, in here she says that the pre-Greeks, or these could be presumed to be the Pelasgians or the Minoans, actually founded um, the so-called Hyksos Empire or whatever. That's what she's saying. Okay, um, the Rig Veda rishis authors were involved with both of them. Then that what we said in the beginning of this, they said that the Xoites and the Pelasgians, they had a relationship. So she's going further to say that the people who wrote the Rig Veda were involved with both of them as well. All all past great kings were deified in the Rig Veda, but interestingly, the Hyksos kings are not recorded among the names of the Akkadian divinities. Okay, the this is page 20. The Indiologists, if there are any now, will be disturbed to know that Greek Helios, sun, were also related to Helie, God, but actually the god was the Egyptian sun god Ra. If we go back to the above comparison of words for God, light, day, sun, or daylight, also it is important to note that Telugu Telugu is language or group of languages spoken in like southern India or just India in general. Telugu word Hili for sun certainly did not come after the Greek word for sun, but there are many Greek words that, as shown in various articles, originated from the legacy of the pre-Greeks in Greek. You keep going to them pre-Greeks, don't we? We gonna assume that she talking about Pelagians or at least Minoans. Okay, so who were associated with the Rig Vedic priests in a very distant past in the Levant. So the Levant was ancient by the time by the time um, uh, a lot of our more notable by the time your Israelites get to the Levant, or it becomes biblically known or whatever, it's already ancient. It already has an ancient past by that time. So apparently, ancestral Indians in Canaan spoke a form of Prakrit. That's another language that Sanskrit is kind of derived from. It has words that based on that, but wrote in a partly artificial Rig Vedic Sanskrit, while classical Sanskrit was seemingly a later development in India. Mandaic spirit named Malka Ziwa, meaning king of light, being another name of the Rig Veda Deus. See above, opened a Pandora's box for the linguist to think about Dyaus very differently than painted by MacDonald and other German Indiologists. They concluded that Dyaus was an Indo-Aryan god and that the Rig Veda, in this case of Dyaus, relapsed to a more primitive stage. The primitive Dyaus is, in fact, was the god Ra of a highly civilized non-Aryan nation. No, they wasn't non-Aryan because the Aryans, like I said, Aryan comes from Aris. They were all same ballpark. This is this Ethiopian lingo. This is this Sabaean lingo. Remember Aryan comes from Kabari, which is talking about the giants, which is talking about the pole. It's a polar mythology. So that, yeah, it all makes sense. You see what I'm saying? Let's keep going. Okay, so this is page 27. Um, let me see. Nabonidus is also known as a restorer of many ancient shrines of Sumer and Akkad. The hymn possibly names some of them, but they are hard to decode except for the temple of Insusinik in the Elamite capital Sushan, called here Sushna. It is not clear what Nabonidus did with it, but maybe he restored the temple as he restored many ancient shrines. Both sacrifices were performed and presided over by the best of Angiras, that is Sumerian priests, who are mentioned to welcome the son of Manu repeatedly and by the best of them. All right. Nabonidus was a direct descendant of the priests of Egyptian Hyksos dynasty, right? The let's see, hymn X62 refers to Nabonidishta as son of Manu, and twice as son of Savarna and Savarna Devi, provides the most important clue for the patronage he received from the Rig Veda priests and Sumerian priests. The king describes himself as descendant of the priests of Devizya Aha Pratamaja. I'm butchering words like crazy. Meaning the firstborn of the god Seth. Ruta is a Rig Vedic name of Egyptian Seth, the favorite god of the Hyksos. The first king, Mandata, was identified with the Ombite Seth. The epithet Manava, meaning son of Manu, mentioned several times in the hymn, glorified Nebanidesta as a descendant of the priests of Manu, another Indian name of the supreme Hyksos monarch of Egypt and most of Syria, Palestine. So basically, they talking about this person who rules the north, the supreme so-called Hyksos monarch or whatever case may be. He's talking about his connections and how um, these guys are not just a ragtag band of desert dwellers or whatever. Their whole thing might have potentially been started by the Pelasgians that we keep referring to or whatever case may be. So these individuals have a bit of tenure in the region that they live in, right? All thousands of years prior to your um, Hellenistic Greeks, right? So another Indian name for supreme Hyksos monarch of Egypt and most of Syria, Palestine. In the epic Purana, Savarna Manu is another name of Manu ve Vasvat, and he is connected to Ishvaku, that is Hyksos, king in all Puranas. Okay, let's see here. Nebanish butcher names. Nabanidishta is called Suvanya, or son of Savarna, and Savarna Deva, and both relate him to the same Hyksos monarch. For his name, Savarna Manu, the inscription of Nabonidus declared that he did not have anything to do with kingship, and he was not somebody with royal blood. He belonged to the priests of Haranu and priests of Sumer, as expressed in the phrase Sarn Yursia Sunur. I'm butchering that. Saranya was Haranu, or modern Haran in Syria, for frequent change of H to S between Sanskrit and Desi words. Desi is like the indigenous tongue that they speak in North, or languages common to northern India. Um, Haranu meant roads, as it was in the intersection of several important trade routes. Similarly, Saran and Sarani in Sanskrit are still words meaning road, just as biblical Haran means road. Historically, Nabonidus is known to have uh, intimate connections to the city of Haran. His mother was a priest of the moon god of Haran, which is in turn could indicate that the moon god of Haran has relations with the moon god of Ur in Sumer. Uh, Sunara, similar in Egypt, uh, Suner was a name of Sumer during Isin Larsa stage. In Egyptians, Suner appeared several times in the Viscery hymns of uh, Thutmoside kings of Egypt as a country far from Egypt. The inscriptions mention that the king's fame reached as far as Sumer. The Egyptologists conjectured the meaning of this unknown land name on the etymology of its roots, and they ascribed a wrong meaning, the mythological circuit or the limit of the known world. Sunara, the feminine Sunari of the Rig Veda, particularly as epithets of gods and goddesses, indicated it was another name of Sumer. This name is also reflected in its similarly with biblical Shinar for Sumer. Apparently, the priestly family of Nabonidus was related to the family of the priests of the moon god of Ur in Sumer, as suggested in the Rig Veda phrase Sunu Rashvo Vipra, meaning Sumerian priest. Okay, so basically, I know this. It may be kind of tedious, and I know I'm mispronouncing words left and right, but as you can see, characters from the Rig Veda, when you really start breaking this stuff down and you start correlating them with place names, in the Near East, the a lot of the people, deities, names of deities, kings, and all that stuff like that, it has a lot of correspondence to the Near East. All this stuff out of your Rig Veda. Why is that if they're so original? You see what I'm saying? If you see what I'm saying? Okay, Nabonidista was a deeply devoted religious man. Even a legend of Nabonidista in the Arya Brahmana recorded that he was excluded from all shares of his inheritance on the plea of his wholly devoted to a religious life. The inheritance here alluded to the division of the world or the Hyksos Empire. This has been explained here in later chapters. The Asiatic territories were divided into many states of varying size, which Father, that is the Supreme King, distributed to warlords, officers, dignitaries, and allies of the Hyksos regime. Like we said before, this is a whole confederacy. This isn't just some ragtag guy, desert dwellers. This is a whole confederacy from, Greece all the way up to the Levant. I mean, you see what I'm saying? And this has been going on for a long time. They didn't just start this during the 14th, 15th, and 16th dynasties of Egypt or whatever, and then get driven out or whatever. Uh, um, Chios or Khasut goes back at least 3,000 years, and they linking it to the Pelasgians in Greece, and the Pelasgians are just understood to be prehistoric. Who knows? You see what I'm saying? Okay, moving right along. The legend of let's see here the legend of deprivation of Nebonidista, whose forefathers served as family priests, presumably of the first Hyksos monarch, could be true. It appears that when an opportunity came, Nebonidista was elected and put on the throne by a powerful priestly group. Amazingly, priests maintained the traditions and records of his family descent for more than a half a millennia. From his epithets, Nebonidista appeared to have been a direct descendant of the priests of the first Hyksos monarchs of Egypt. Okay, let's see here. Back in from Crete to Egypt, page 33. Let's see here. Just skipping around a little bit. Cause this covers a lot of ground. It's a decent little size volume. All I can do is jump, play hopscotch, read little portions of paragraphs here or there, or whatever case may be, to kind of give you a idea of what we're talking about. So, page 33. All right. God Kartakia, a Mycenaean Cretan hero. That's the title of this chapter. So Kartakia in popular tradition is the son of Lord Shiva, right? In South India. All right. And he's going to talk about how that even came about or whatever. The worship of Kartakia. She's tracing the worship of Kartakia back to the Isle of Crete. Remember, we talked about the Isle of Crete. It was founded 5000 BC. You see what I'm saying? So let's get into this a little bit. Okay, so this chapter, through various names and epithets, explore the connection of a celebrated Rig Veda hero, Kutsa Arjuna, to a god of Cretan Mycenaean origin. It also traces the deification of Mycenaean hero and his popularity as a god in various places of the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, Syria, Palestine, and Phoenicia. Much of the information about this deified Rig Veda hero comes by identifying him with Karta Kartavira Arjuna, another ancient king of the epic Puranas, based on the similarity and significance of their names and epithets. Again, the same type of similarity of names and attributes of a divinity led to another revelation that before being transcended into a deity, the god of the Rig Veda was a king and a warrior. He is a Hindu god, Skanda Kartikeya, the everlasting commander in chief of the gods. So remember, we talking about that's the son of Lord Shiva. That's who he is for understood to be today. Okay, so God Kartikeya in reality is an emblem of continuity of a past hero, Kutsa Arjuna, who has survived in the later literature through King uh, Kartavirya Arjuna. The comparison equation of their epithetic names unravels some astounding truths, such as the origin of the biblical tribe of Judah, Hebrew Yahuda, from the island of Crete, their presence in the Rig Veda as the tribe of Yadu, and their relationship with the ancestry of both King David and Jesus Christ of the Bible, all that finally led to some more incredible revelations that the handsome young god uh, Kartika represented the famous priest king of the Cretan fresco, and the Canaanite god Asherah, you see what I'm saying, was also a Cretan deity known to the scholars as the mother goddess of Crete. So remember, we're going right back into this whole mother goddess thing, mother and child thing, because like I said, all these people are Ethiopians. All right, so this is page 34. We're gonna go on to page 35. The Karta portion of the name means Cretan, since Kreta in the Rig Veda indicates the country Crete, Greek Crete, Kreta. The existence of the country Kreta for Crete in the Rig Veda is further supported by the constituent Kreta in many ancient names. So why are they talking about Crete in the Rig Veda? You feel me? Okay, the other part of the royal name Virya means son of a warrior. Virya in the classical Sanskrit also means valor, heroism, since Vira is a common word for warrior or hero. While Arjuna is his royal toponymical title, the subsequent sections will explain how the name and epithets of King Kartavira Arjuna and the attributes of God Kartika could connect them to the ancient places and people of Eastern Mediterranean coast and islands, particularly Crete, which in turn helps to understand the significance of some obscure names in a Rig Veda hymn concerning Kutsa. In the Rig Veda, Kutsa being identified with Indra is also inseparable from the god Indra, yet his evolution into a distinct god Kartika took place in the Near East is almost evident in the existence of his name in extra Indian sources, from Hittite texts to the Aramic and Mandaean inscriptions. The connection of Kutsa Arjuna, King Kartavira Arjuna, and the god Kartika to the Mediterranean world also reveals the involvement of the Rig Veda priests who were Luvian. I think we talked about the Luvians. You see what I'm saying? Uh, with a people called the Mycenaean pre-Greeks, or the Mycenaean, for they were akin to them, right? Okay, so they were akin to these Ethiopians that were running around here. So the people who were suspected of being the priests of the Rig Veda were akin to some of these other groups of Ethiopians that were running around here. Okay, so let's see here. This is evidenced by similarities between Mycenaean deities in Homer and in Linear B tablets with deities of the Rig Veda. This, in turn, for the first time, opens a world of the Greek myths to be compared with certain names and features of the Indian myths in Section B, which deals with the tribe Yadu, as he's called. She's relating that to the tribe of Judah and all that. Yadu and their role in the Rig Veda in connection to Kutsa. The last part of this chapter shows how that could be complementary and useful to both students in Indian as well as those of classical and historical studies. The importance of Libya in the Greek myths leads, we talked about who the Libyans are. Already talked about who the Libyans, Phoenicians are. That go check out previous videos we already did. The importance of Libya in the Greek myths leads to the hidden existence of the same country in the ancient Indian text. Now, why are the ancient Indian texts talking about Libya? Okay, and myths. Okay, so the importance of living in the Greek myths leads to the hidden existence of the same country in the ancient Indian texts and myths, explaining in turn the reason for the prominence of Libya in Greek myths. You feel me? Okay, so keeping it moving. Page 39. Most of the important persons, kings, and countries of the Rig Veda are present in later texts, particularly in the Mahabharata, but often in the disguise of different names and synonyms. Sometimes a derogatory sense is attached to the name if the person, king, or country concerned was an enemy of the New Kingdom Egyptian kings. You see what I'm saying? Because as they're writing some of this stuff, she's talking about how politics are coming into play, and they're writing it based on politics. I mean, same thing we witnessed when we talked about the Sabian phase, and the snake being demonized. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of Satuk's attributes being replaced with Tahuti and all that stuff like that. So one cult has the potentiality to be demonized in the face of another. So sometimes a derogatory sense is attached to the name if the person, king, or country concerned was an enemy of the New Kingdom Egyptian kings. It has been hinted in some articles of the previous book by the author that the priestly feud between Vasishta and Vas, Vasvamitra in, indicated a rift in the foreign federation of powers that ruled Egypt and caused a bitter and long-lasting rivalry between the two priestly groups. Okay, the rift ultimately led to the fall of the foreign federation of Egypt and demise of the Hyksos Empire. You see what I'm saying? Uh, it seems after the fall of the Mitannians, all remaining Vedic priests, either in Syria, Palestine, or in Egypt, became pro-Egyptian, that is, supporters of the line of New Kingdom Egyptian kings. For that, it is particularly difficult to trace Kutsa in the latter text because kings of the line later became increasingly involved with the enemies of the Egyptians, such as Libyans and the Sea People. So basically, she's talking about in the latter dynasties, or whatever the case may be, in the latter phases of their whole empire, alliances started to shift as certain empires started to leave, start to decline and everything like that. And as they started writing this stuff, or whatever case may be, certain deities that had been in prominence prior to that, or certain individuals that had been in prominence, or what have you, were no longer either written about, or they were demonized, or what have you. So moving right along. All right, page 40. Soma, a Rig Veda name of Lebanon. The myth that Kartika was anointed in the holy, a pun for Kadesh, place of Soma, or the holy place of the moon god, seems another stylistic rendering of Lebanon after the moon god's Semitic name Labana. As we know, like Labana, the name literally means milky white, but if you break it down phonetically, Labana is a name that denotes Lebanon. They're talking about Lebanon when you see that. Um, Even the sons of Canaan are places. You see what I'm saying? Okay. In brief, Kartika, that is the Rig Veda hero Kutsa, was anointed in Kodesh, Lebanon. The demon Ravana, that is son of Ravana, proves another form of Lebanon's ancient name, Laban. So even the name Ravana, the antagonist against Rama in the Ramayana, is the name of Lebanon. You see what I'm saying? All right. So let's see here. In brief, Kartika, that is the Rig Veda hero Kutsa, was anointed in Kadesh, Lebanon. The demon Ravana, that is son of Ravana, proves another form of Lebanon's ancient name, Laban. The old Assyrian name, Labana, for the moon god is still surviving in the Hebrew word Labana for moon. Naturally, the epic Purana authors called Ravana a demon who in reality was a king of the state of Kodesh, or Lebanon, because he was an enemy of the New Kingdom kings, particularly Ramesses the Great. So allegiances started to shift and everything like that by the time that they were writing that story. So that's why he became the villain in the story, as opposed to um, in previous eras, or whatever case may be, the king of Lebanon might have been in favor. Okay. All right, page 46. Ravana as a name of Mahendra revealed not only that he was a king of Lavana, that is a name of Lebanon. He was peep this. He was a pre-Greek Mycenaean ruler, same as the race of Sambara, who were hated by the pro-Egyptian authors of the epic Purana. Right. So he's saying that they the people who wrote the epic Puranas and all your Vedic scriptures and everything like that, they were priests out of Egypt. You see what I'm saying? So that's basically what she's saying. Okay, who were hated by the pro-Egyptian authors of the Epic Purana, it becomes obvious that Ravana of the epic Ramayana as a much later king than Mahendra, that is Kutsa of the Rig Veda, belonged to the same race, the reason for which he was demonized. Rama of the Ramayana being a reflection of the Egyptian king Ramesses II, right? So basically, what she's saying, it ain't no Rama from the Ramayana. Rama from the Ramayana is Ramesses. You see what I'm saying? That character comes from the exploits of Ramesses the Great. Okay. Also unveils a and hitherto unknown dimension of the Egyptian history, that the struggle of the Egyptian kings against the royal race of giants, the struggle of the Egyptian king against the royal race of giants. So ain't then we just say Aryan comes from Ari, the I and the Y interchangeable, and the Kabari are the giants. So maybe they could potentially be called them Aryans to denote their descendancy from the giants or whatever the case may be. So moving right along. Okay. Also unravels and hitherto unknown dimension of the Egyptian history, that the struggle of the Egyptian kings against the royal race of giants did not end with the end of the Hyksos era with the destruction of Megiddo or the defeat of Kodesh, but continued through the Libyan wars. So this is what they talking about. They talking about what is it? I can't remember which one it is, but I think it's the Mahabharata. I think that's the Battle of 10 Kings. You see what I'm saying? So these are events and things that take place in the Near East and everything like that. These are not things that um, necessarily happen in the time frame that they're talking about. And a lot of the stuff that they're talking about took place in Africa. They just traveled somewhere else and wrote those stories down in a different language. All right, moving right along, page number 47. Okay, Kartika and his divine spirit in the Mahabharata, Sakti, meaning power, is the name of Kartikeya's spirit, the same as Vajra of the other texts. The various myths of Kartika obtaining the gift of this divine weapon, Vajra, from Shiva or Shri. In various Indian traditions does not matter, because what matters is the depiction of Kartika with this weapon. The thunder symbol of Vajra of Kartiki meant he was identified with Indra, because identical to Indra, Canaanite Baal, same as Akkadian Adad and Syrian Hadad, uh, who appear from sculptures and statues all over Syria, Palestine, to have been a chief god of the ancient Canaan, also demonstrates the same supremacy of the Lebanese kings over all of the kings of Canaan. In the Rig Veda, as has been pointed out in many previous articles, the real kings were identified with the representative gods of their kingdoms, and Indra was the god of the cedar forest, that is of Lebanon in Syria. So she's even saying that Indra comes from Baal, and Indra is if you go back into the language or whatever case may be, she's talking about Indra ties into the cedar forest of Lebanon. So even Indra ain't from India. You see what I'm saying? It's often thought that India is named after Indra, but Indra is not even derived from India. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so Kartiki in the Dravidian tradition, Cholos, who formed the oldest known kingdom of South India, traditional estimate around 600 BC, worship Kartika by his Dravidian. Okay, yeah. Okay, Cholas, who formed the oldest known kingdom of South India, traditional estimate around 600 BC, worshipped Kartiki by his Dravidian name Muruga or Murugan. Kartika is the only god to have a uniquely Dravidian name from since such an early period. Tamil texts, Puram, and other anthology of old orally circulated poems collected between AD the 5th and the 9th century AD contain odes to Mordegon. In fact, some local scholars think that Mordegon was an old Dravidian god as he was worshipped from very remote times and even in remote villages. However, all the four oldest known kingdoms of South India were ruled by kings who seemingly had their roots in Egypt and Nubia. Remember how we were talking about Ethiopia when we talk about Eastern and Western Ethiopia? Um, Eastern Ethiopia is India. So, and we class the Dravidians as Ethiopians as well. Yeah. Okay. So moving right along, they claim to have been of Ishvaku race. Ishvaku, the son of Manu. Okay, that is once their ancestors were vassals of or worked for the Hyksos overlords of Egypt. So naturally, like Maurya and Saka kings who worshipped Kartiki, Cholas also brought the god from Levant to Egypt. He's saying the Cholas brought Kartiki from the Levant to Egypt. Okay, so or they were one of the groups. You see what I'm saying? So moving right along. All right, Kartiki in the Hittite text, the name of the founder of the old Hittite kingdom can be found in the Rig Veda and in the Mahabharata. Moreover, the Near Eastern background of the Rig Veda suggests that the Luvians and the Pelasgian priests who served the Hittites as stated in the Hittite text, seem to have been closely related to the priests of the Rig Veda. So that's why we went and did it. That's why the timeline in the beginning of this video, we went over the Hittites in their time frame as well, so we kind of get an idea for that. Okay, so as well as the ancestral authors of the older and extinct polytexts, their names are seemingly the Hittite form of the names of the Rig Veda and Pali priests. Also, the Neo-Hittite texts contain a surprising number of divine names similar to Indian names of Vedic deities. Most astounding is the presence of the god Kartiki, even in the scriptures of Yazilikeya, which has a mixture of Hurrian, Sumerian, Hattic, and Egyptian deities. For example, Kar-T, the hieroglyphic name of a god in Yazilikeya, is undoubtedly a rendering of the god Kartikeya's name. Tudhaliya, uh, the fourth sacrificial list, named god Kartiki by his epithet, named the deity of the spear. So it is not surprising that even the place named Yaziliya, Yazilikaya has been preserved in an Indian text as a place name Ugalika. It is noted that cuneiform Z interchanges for D and T group of Sanskrit alphabets as well as hard and soft G, depending on the dialects, to help to recognize. Yeah, Panini and its variants Jotilika as Sanskrit rendering of the same place Hittite Yazilika without the ending Ya for usual interchange of Y and J. So in the end, obviously you wouldn't be able to write a thesis off of this, what I'm saying, me trying to pronounce these words, but at the end of the day, you know, you could grab a copy of this and sit down with it or whatever case may be. But I'm basically trying to make a point that this stuff, their whole thing comes out of Egypt or whatever. They come across the Levant, they create Sanskrit, and then they do the whole Aryan thing, and they develop the Vedic culture from there or whatever case may be. But this stuff originally comes out of Egypt and everything like that. And also that the Hyksos, they're not just a couple guys in the desert or something like that who just took over some. Nah, this is a whole confederacy, the king of the north, the whole it's a whole empire these cats got going on. So we continue through this. One sec. All right, page 50. From the point of view of its meaning, the name Kiti Vanta parallels the Rig Veda country Cretevan, or Lord of Creta, that is, Crete, the largest of the Mediterranean islands. The significance of the strange Rig Veda name Creteban, short form of Crete, Kretabanta for Kizuwantna, about the region of classical Sicilia from 1700 to circa 1400 BC, has been explained in the previous book by the author. The meaning of the Creteban, Lord of Crete, that is, Crete, suggests Kizuwantna as a country in Sicilia was named either after the Cretan god or king. It is likely the Kizuwantna was founded by a conqueror of the island Crete. The Article 8 has also proved that Rig Veda country Crete was a predecessor of the Greco-Roman name Creta for its modern name Crete. You see what I'm saying? Kiti appearing in innumerable Pali personal names proves that Kiti and Kriti of the epic Purana were two later names of the Rig Veda Krita, referring to the island of Crete. You see what I'm saying? So why would the Rig Veda be talking about Crete? You see what I'm saying? If it's everything that they say it is. You see what I'm saying? Now to keep going. All right, page 51. All right. There are three royalties in the later text by the name Arjuna. The one in Pali text is a great archer and a king of Kikaka, and other Kartavirja. Arjuna appears as a great hero, archer, and a king of Haya tribes. In all Purana, and particularly in the side stories and minor episodes of Mahabharata, ancient commentators identified Arjuna of Pali texts with Kartavirja Arjuna, which indicated that both Pali and Puranic accounts are about an ancient king Arjuna of the cedar forest and Kodesh. Okay, an ancient king Arjuna of the cedar forest in Kodesh, or whatever. When he talk about the cedar forest, he relating it back to Lebanon. In some Puranas, Kartavira Arjuna was a world emperor, right? Sound like a pharaoh of some sort, don't it? He was a son of an ancient king, Kretavira, whose name meant son of a Cretan warrior. Kartavira was born in a family of Yadus. That's his family that they associate with the you know, tribe of Israel and all that. And in the line of Mahi Shamati kings. Kartavira kingdom is Mahi Shamati, identical with Xoite known in Egypt, or Khasut, what we've been talking about. Although the details of his descendants, their names, and the stories about his death and destruction vary in every book, they all point to the existence of one great emperor by the name Kartavira Arjuna, a king of Lebanon, right? For his name Arjuna, as well as the overlord of Libya, because Kartavira Arjuna is said to be a king of Mahishmati, which, as we will see in chapter 3, was the Egyptian city of Xoites. Okay, so that's what they call it in the Rig Veda, but that's Xoites. Mahi Mahishmati. That's what they call in the city of Xoites. And a chief city of Libya, the third royalty, Pandava Arjuna, is discussed below. So it's going into some of the characters and some of the individuals, you see what I'm saying, and some of the side stories and epics and everything like that or whatever. And it's going right back into this same thing. This is what they actually talking about. They talking about the ancient Near East. It has nothing to do with India. All right, page 59. Yadu's Canaanites and Yavanas, presumably Yadus who were in the southeast Egypt from an unknown period of time, played an important role in the literature from the Rig Veda onward. Yadus were related to Canaanites, who are discussed who Canaanites are, and very likely speakers of a northwest Semite dialect. Yadus were also related to palace builder Minoans, who had been conquered by the Mycenaean pre-Greeks. Later, they became increasingly mixed with them. In the epic Purana text, they are not distinguished from Yavanas. It can only be conjectured yet that Yadus formed a closely aligned togetherness with Mycenaean pre-Greeks from an archaic period of history. It is hard to distinguish them in the ancient Indian text. Nevertheless, the chapter focuses on the importance of the island of Crete in the literature and the far-reaching contributions of the forgotten Minoan Mycenaean culture. The chapter also proves that the Yadus were related to Crete. You see what I'm saying? As As Ra, the mother goddess of Crete. Again, we go back to this mother goddess concept. Okay, besides the far-reaching significance of the picture of a so-called priest king of Crete and his peacock-tailed crown, the archaeological remains of some shrines of a mother goddess in Crete provide the ultimate clue of the origin of the Yadu, the name of an ancient race. According to Vaughn, archaeologically, a mother goddess associated with a tree, the same thing we read in Celestial Ship of the North, that the tree and the lake and the snake, all that ties into the Sabian concept. Okay, a mother goddess associated with the tree and a boy god were the two chief divinities of Crete. Sound Ethiopian, don't it? She was also closely connected to the sea. In the words of Vaughn, to signify her mother goddess association with the sea, the shrines of the mother goddess are often paved with seashells, water-worn pebbles. Their walls are adorned with flying fish and sea sprays, pitchers, cups reserved for her, and decorated with water creatures and with seaweed. Since as mistress of the sea, all these things belong to her. She also had a ship, and the design of such signet rings show her steering a ship across the waters. An ancient script called Linear A has been found throughout the Isle of Crete, but it is mostly undeciphered. However, the decipher of one single name, Ra, by Palmer, now opens a new and unknown chapter of the history of civilization. Palmer used the methods of Michael Ventris, the short-lived genius who successfully deciphered Linear B scripts. Okay, page 64. Early Amorites were Cretans, right? So he's saying the early Amorites were Cretans because remember how I was saying like Canaanites are Ethiopians. You see what I'm saying? All the sons of Canaan, from a biblical perspective, are places. You see what I'm saying? Those are place names. And even by the time you even get to the biblical connotation of the land of Canaan, it's already ancient. It has an ancient past already. Okay, so early Amorites were Cretan. It is amazing that from long before the volcanic eruption of 1580 in Santorini and the resulting earthquake and tsunami that completely destroyed the palace civilization of Crete. So this is the event. Uh, this is one of the events that happened that destroyed their culture, or what have you. Minoans were colonizing all along the Mediterranean coast from the Asia Minor to Syria, Palestine. During 1500 BC, Egyptians called the entire basin of the Eastern Mediterranean KF-TW. I don't know the vocalization for it. Vocalar is Kaftal. But later, Kaftal was a name of the island of Crete. All right, so basically saying that's what the Egyptians called it first. From that standpoint, it is likely that the early Amorites were Cretans and they had a state Amuru on the Mediterranean coast of Lebanon. The decipherment of Asara in Linear A tablets dated from 2000 BC, testifying to the presence of the Rig Veda rishis, a people akin to or same as the Luvians, who lived in Lycia, located on the other side of the Mediterranean within the domain of the maritime empire of the Cretans. The name Huron and Yam in Egyptian excretation texts of about 2000 BC were hieroglyphic versions of the two names of the sea god Varuna. Later Amorites were mixed Cretan Mycenaean descendants. Amorites during and after the 16th Hyksos dynasty of Egypt were very likely a mixed race of Cretan and pre-Greek Mycenaean descent. Apparently, these people for about a century dominated an empire of incredible extent. Okay, peep this. These people for about a century dominated an empire of incredible extent from Asia Minor to Egypt, including Nubia, when Indra, Syrian Hadad, Akkadian Adad, became the foremost god of the Rig Veda. The Cretan kingdom Amurru in Syria was taken over by the Mycenaean Greeks, who later formed the 16th Hyksos dynasty of Egypt. This is her saying this. The conquest of Egypt probably began from Libya and was completed by the conquest of the former Kushite confederation of Elamites and Hurrians in Nubia by King Mahatda, um, Mandata, called Ombite Seth in the Egyptian Tanis Stela. The hero king Kushta epithet revealed an astounding fact that probably this Rig Veda hero king conquered Crete. Kutsa was identified with Indra, and presumably he belonged to the race of Mycenaean pre-Greeks, as implied by his title Juno Kutsa. Juno meant Ionian, a Rig Veda name for a part of the coast of Asia Minor from before Homer. So yeah, it's a whole lot of emphasis on that part of the world, and they're not talking. They're really not talking a lot about India, as you can see. So we're gonna keep going. All right, this is page 66. Okay, the 16th Egyptian dynasty of Hyksos kings was established in Egypt by Mandata, that is a Mycenaean Greek king. But prior to the 14th and 15th dynasties of Kizuwantna and Libya were also of Kutsa's race. Historians A. Kurt admitted that the Hyksos era of Egypt, the extent of the Hyksos Empire, and implications of Cretan style artifacts and wall paintings in Egypt are really obscure. Kutsa Indra of Rig Veda, coordinated with the epic Purana king Kartavirya, uh, provides valuable insights of the beginning of the Hyksos era and reasons for the Minoan links to Egypt. All right. Mm. All right. Roughly a millennia, roughly a millennium, including the Hyksos period, the name Amuru disappeared from the Near Eastern text simply because no one realized that it had several rigged Vedic or new names such as Dakshina and Yonima. Then, from about 1300 to 1200 BC, Amuru reappeared as the name of a definite land in the western slopes of the Cedar Forest of Lebanon, as mentioned in Ugarit text and Ramesses III account that the sea people made their camp or center at Amur. The old name was repeated by the retreating warlords and their routines, uh, from the Egypt. But by that time, there were no Rig Veda rishis to give a sanctified new name to their country. The new Amor, as has been shown, is reflected in Amorat Ravi, Amar Avati, and Amara of the Pali and the epic Puranas, same as Indra Prastha, the new capital of the Pandava after the return from exile. So he's talking about when you talk about the he's talking about the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita. Um, moving right along. All right, skipping around, page 138. And again, with this one, you may have to rewind this a couple of times. I'm just really trying to get this on wax to kind of make these points or whatever. You might actually have to, get this book. It's kind of dense material. I know it. I know it's a bit to get through this, but at the end of the day, a lot of the points that are being made, I'm really trying to drive this home. What we're talking about and how we come to this conclusion, that the Hyksos are the Vedic people. So this is how we come to this conclusion. Okay, page 138. Kushan kings of India and their people migrated from Syria, an ancient Sanskrit poem in an astrological book first mentioned by Kern in his translation of Vrahet Samhita, interestingly referred to as Saka kings. Remember, Xoites, Khasut is also called Saka, Egypt. All right, uh, which has been quoted in the geographical data of the early Puranas. In this verse, Sakisvara, kings of Sakas, that is Saka, king of India, has also a title of Ruma, Disa Depati, lord of the country Ruma. There is no ancient or modern country or place by the name Ruma in India. See, that's one of the situations we run into. Apparently, it was a carryover, an old title of the Saka kings from a previous Syrian place of migration, because they come in out of the Levant and all that. Retaining of the old royal titles pertaining to the last country ruled by a king or his ancestors is common to the epic Purana, such as Kasai kings for Mitannian kings. The title meaning Lord of Ruma indicates that Saka kings of the Kushan dynasty migrated from Syrian state called Kusana Ruma in Egyptian. The Bible called the king Rasha Dam, an Ethiopian, which is correct, and his ethnicity provides an enlightening insight as follows, right? The previous book of this author proves that Nubia slash Ethiopia played a very important role in the Rig Veda and literature of the epic Purana. I know because all these people, it takes some digging to even come to the conclusion that all these civilizations are collectively Ethiopian. So she's dividing a lot of this stuff up and talking about this group and that group. But from previous videos and research, we know that this whole collective that she's talking about are all Ethiopians, right? So the previous book of this author proves that Nubia, Ethiopia played a very important role in the Rig Veda and the literature of the epic Purunas. The names of divinities, royal epithets, and myths became more and more meaningful, yielding more information by their meticulous comparison with ancient Egyptian and Near Eastern names. As a result, a very new but logical and rational history arose about the ancient but unknown colonizers of ancient Nubia. They were Asiatics, namely Amorites, Hurrites, Elamites, but with them there were some other races of mercenaries such as Sakas or Scythians. The analysis of various types of names in the ancient Indian texts indicate that they were involved with Nubia from a very early time. Yes, because they were all Ethiopians. Now, a lot of them probably come from Nubia. Remember, we said that's where Phoenicians come from, the Erythraean Sea. The Red Sea is the borderline between Eastern and Western Ethiopia. Yeah, that's where they come from. So that's why that's even a thing. Okay, so in sum, right? She's gonna summarize this whole little chapter she did that she's talking about. Great point in this last paragraph. In sum, the foreign colonies of Nubia mentioned in the 6th dynasty Egyptian text dating around 3rd millennium BC were colonies of the Asiatic people. This is what she's saying. Okay, the various articles of the previous book and a few of the book prove step by step the political evolution of Nubia from the origin of its name Kush to its becoming a part of the huge Hyksos Xoite Empire. Umbos was an important Nubian city, yet an ancestor of Ramesses III was identified with the god Seth of Umbos. Ramesses II or Ramesses the Great was related to the Hyksos kings who conquered Umbos and was identified with its chief god. The king Rishantium of the Bible proved that the king related to those Scythian people once also lived in Syria. So basically, let's kind of reframe that because she's calling them Asiatic. Nobody's Asiatic. Um, in that sense, if anything, they left Egypt and went further off into what we would consider Asian stuff like that. So they're not Asiatic rulers like she's talking about. There's never been a time where Asiatic rulers have conquered Nubia. So that's never been a thing. If anything, that they went out and they had some sort of confederation or alliance with these individuals because they were all Ethiopian and they were all of the same blood. If anything, you go into India and you see places with Kush names, Hindu Kush, Indus Kush, all those names like that because that's where they come from. So we're gonna keep going. All right, page 140. Kushan kings and Kasana Ruma of Syria, the foreign soldiers, including the Nubian army, which the Egyptologists believe Egyptian kings obtained them as prisoners of war, were in reality remains of the Hyksos mercenaries who voluntarily joined with the New Kingdom kings and remained in Egypt after the division of the empire, that is, at the end of the Hyksos period. It may be concluded that the Kushan kings of India, before their migration from Kusana Ruma of Syria to India, were at home in Nubia. They are warlords and troops captains were in charge of the various Nubian regions during the late Hyksos time and the Libyan era. Thus, they were associated with the Rig Veda and Pali priests and were familiar with the Vedic deities prior to their arrival in India. The great soldier Kartika was popular among them because they were chiefly a race of mercenaries. Sound like the Majayu or something like that, because the Nubians were like that. Okay, they were certainly one of the people who brought God Kartikeya to India with them. It necessitates an examination of all available data that these people in the Near East document from where they came to India. The following sections prove the Scythopolis, a Greek name of Beth Sheen, was originally after a older Rig Veda name for the same city, which was a garrison of Saka soldiers, long before the classical Greeks or the Jewish state of Israel. Because again, that whole region was ancient before any of that got there. So we're gonna keep going, keep pressing through. We almost done. Okay, so a common misconception about Sakas in India, the common notion that the Sakas, a Scythian tribe, invaded India in about 200 BC is incorrect. Indian Sakas were not an entirely foreign people to India because this chapter demonstrates that they were associated with the Rig Veda priests, authors in the Levant, long before their appearance in India. The name of these people, their kings, and the name of their Syrian city are mentioned repeatedly in some hymns. It is not at all a surprise that the earliest Saka coins in India, contain some of the major names of the god Kartikeya and names of other Rig Vedic deities like Usha, Rudra, and Shiva. Contrary to the current idea of their quick conversion and succumbing to the influence of Indian religion, they worshiped Kartika prior to their arrival in India. The Saka of the Mahabharata were not at all related to the Saka of historical India, right? The ones from the epic weren't related to the ones of historical India because they're different groups of Saka kings, and they're gonna try to tell you that's not the same thing. Okay, the Saka of Mahabharata were not related to the Saka of historical India. The important role of the Saka kings of Mahabharata, such as their king mentioned amongst the kings to whom Pandavas ought to send messengers, implies a Saka kingdom which cannot be true for India, neither for the epic stories of the defeat of the Sakas by the war expeditions of various Pandava princes in various directions of the country, which indicates their presence throughout the country. It will be highly anachronistic to associate the anti-anachronistic to associate the historically known Sakas of India with the Sakas of the Mahabharata. So you're basically talking about the people who the historical Sakas in India or whatever case may be are not the same people that they're talking about in this epic of the Mahabharata because it's a whole nother period of time or whatever case may be, and it's a whole nother place. More appropriately, it is not possible for the Indo-Scythians to take part in the great battle of the Mahabharata by joining the army of Duryodhana against the Pandava brothers when no one could think that the great battle of Mahabharata, come on, nobody could think that the great battle of Mahabharata was fought during the 2nd century AD. That is during the time of historically known India. The context of Mahabharata, although written in Sanskrit, was ancient Syria, Palestine, right? So it's saying that didn't even take place in India. The Mahabharata didn't even take place in India. So let's keep going. Okay, so this is gonna go back to what we were talking about Ophion and the Athophian thing or whatever case may be. Where we were talking about Ophion, who Ethiopians are named after. Ophion ties into Uranus in Greek mythology or whatever. Soot, the original Soot in Egyptian, Nubian mythology or whatever case may be. But also Ophion has a parallel with Poseidon, or more appropriately, Oceanus. You see what I'm saying as well. So we're gonna get into that. We talked about in previous videos that to the Phoenicians who were seafarers and everything like that, Poseidon was a big deal. Back in far, far gone times or whatever. The fish, certain aquatic creatures were considered sacred, and the symbol of the fish was a big deal globally. So us keep going. Kartakia and Homeric Zeus. Linear B tablets from Pythos revealed that at Pythos and everywhere in the Peloponnesia, the Poseidon has the upper hand rather than Homeric Zeus. So it was a time that Poseidon was the big dog as opposed to Zeus. Okay, in the words of Palmer, Poseidon is the first name and has the pride of place regarding offerings, which made him think that Zeus in Homer probably go back to more ancient times. Homer's compositions supposedly reflect Mycenaean prehistory and religion in which Zeus is the supreme god. It may also be envisaged that Mycenae was a little older than Pylos, which was settled a little later and by a little different group of people. If god Poseidon reflected the place Sidon, then it follows that Pylos was founded later than Sidon. So as we start getting into these various places, so Sidon is a Phoenician, Canaanite city or whatever the case may be. Okay, Canaanites go back into this whole uh Sabian idea and everything like that. Pylos was founded later than Sidon, since Poseidon from the tablets appeared to be its chief deity. Indeed, the feminine Poseidia without the place index Po resembles Rig Veda Svada and Aramaic Sida. You see what I'm saying? So they're saying even those names are derived from, Poseidon and everything like that. They're still making references toward this part of the world. Okay, the Egyptian. Okay, this page 98. Okay, just jumping around. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm just trying to kind of cover certain points. Okay, the Egyptian tutelar names of the city of Xoites. Xoites had many magnificent tutelar names in Egyptian. Xoites is Khasut. Anytime you hear Xoites, that's Khasut. All right. Particularly in the 20th dynasty Egyptian lexicon, the epithetic names of the city and of its district, as well as some evidence of the Indian text, suggest that Manetho was correct in his statement that 76 kings of Xois formed Egyptian 14 dynasty. Egyptologist Gardner did not believe it, and he taunted the ancient author by conjecturing that the district Xois might have been Manetho's homeland, thus glorifying his own town. The name Nashada in the Rig Veda occurs only 3 times as a proper name, but has been mutilated by a common method of inserting a special R, like the name of the Egyptian goddess Neith, so that it reads Nerishad for Nishad. In some Vedic texts, Nishad is said to be Denava, and that explains the reason for its deformation. The pro-Egyptian authors harbored these sons of Danu, who were said as Homer's Danaan, that is a race of pre-Greeks, an arch enemy of their kings from the days of the Rig Veda, Battle of 10 Kings, right? Following the age-old Egyptian style of defiling the ethnic names by ascribing a derogatory sense to them. The later priest kings, the Rig Veda and Puruni, used Danava in the sense of goblins and monsters, but the Rig Veda raised them as great soldiers. It became apparent that Manetho's 14th dynasty of Egypt, based on the city of Xois, was formed by a race of pre-Greek Mycenaean kings of Danabas, same as Homer's Danaan. So again, we going back to what we talked about in the recap in the beginning, how it's this interplay between these two groups, okay, these Egyptians of the Delta and these Pelasgian Greeks. Okay, the connection of the Shechem kings to the previous Hyksos regime, the barbarous status of Virasena and Ika Levya in the Mahabharata, and the fact that Ika Levya was a great archer proves that they descend from warlords and soldiers of Libya. The kings of the 16th Hyksos dynasty of Egypt were also from Libya, indicating some connection of the ancestors of Amarna, Birasena, and Labaya to the previous Hyksos regime in Egypt. The ancestors likely became royalties of Shechem in exchange for military service to the Hyksos kings, such as Mandata. The Indian myths suggest that many kingdoms were created or old ones were allotted to their favorite warlords in Syria, Palestine by the Hyksos monarchs of Egypt. The Sanskrit names of two princes, Barasena and Labaya of Shechem, indicate that this Jordanian city, Shechem, was one such city state where during the Amarna time the descendants of Libyan princes and warlords were still residing in the ruling the city. This leads to the conclusion that the Tower of Shechem was the temple of Mahasina, that is the great soldier Kartakia. So again, this another thing linking the two. All right, almost done. Gonna make like two more points and then we up out of here. Okay, so this page 90. Okay, this chapter is called God Kartakia in Ancient Palestine, Phoenicia, and the Libya of the Greeks, right? This chapter demonstrates that the convictions of the Greek historian Herodotus, 500 BC, and other classical writers were correct regarding the existence of Hercules and Heracleid dynasties. Hercules, and we have to remember Hercules comes from Melkort. There is no Hercules. Hercules comes from Melkort. So, and Melkort is Phoenician. I think Melkort is like the patron god of Tyre at a particular time. So, moving right along, Hercules, before being transformed into a mythical hero, was originally the same deified hero King Kutsa of the Rig Veda and King Kartavirya Arjuna of the Mahabharata. The Hercules in India migrated from the Levant and found the earliest known kingdoms of India. Kartika, the deified hero, was worshipped in Magda, the oldest known kingdom in North India. He was also worshipped in the Chola kingdom, the oldest known kingdom of South India. The chapter highlights an important event of prehistoric India, mass migration from Shechem, that same place we just mentioned, a important place of the god Kartikeya in the Levant. Okay. Also, it reveals an amazing fact about the links of the previous Hyksos regime of Egypt with the places where the god was important, such as in Phoenician and Libyan cities. Okay, so yeah, so he's basically talking about even Kartakia. Kartakia even links with uh, Hercules, and like I said, there is no Hercules. Hercules comes from Melkort, so that's how they arrived at that. So even Kartakia is influenced by this Phoenician, what she's calling Mycenaean pre-Greek or whatever. But regardless of what you call it, you can call it light bread if you want to. It's still Ethiopians, as we've already established. Okay, so we're gonna go to this last little piece to kind of like punctuate this thing, and then we up out of here. All right, last little piece, page number 78. All right. Dakshina was a goddess of a place in Cilicia and also the name of that place. It is apparently the same place called Matraspada or Mother's Place in the Rig Veda. Matri or Mother, the name of Cilician place, occurs as the name of a Gotra in Panini and among divine synonyms of the Mahabharata, which have been discussed in a previous article with the conclusion that it is the same place referred to as Thebes in Homer. The name was a repeat of the Egyptian city Thebes. Classical, so why would they have that in there? Classical scholars called the place Cilician Thebes, right? The same Cilician city also figures as Sudakshina in the Mahabharata by translating one of Thebes' Egyptian names to the southern city. The name of the goddess Dakshina was a Rig Veda translation of Egyptian Mut, right? So this is the punchline. This is one of the main punchlines of this whole thing. The name of the chief goddess of the Egyptian Thebes, because Egyptian Mut also means mother, and this is the punchline, major punchline. Most Rig Veda divinities, as found out by this author, were Egyptian deities. Let's say that again. Most Rig Veda divinities, as found out by this author, were Egyptian deities, and that's on page number 78 of this book. You see what I'm saying? Sukritasu, belonging to or of Krita, that is of Crete, mentioned several times in the Rig Veda, also refer to a divinity of Crete. Sukritasu Tasu, belonging to Crete. Similarly, Sudakshina refers to a divinity as well as the place of that divinity, which, like Dakshina, indicates a place, Krita, a Rig Veda name for Crete. So, yeah, so you just kind of want to lay that down. Um, so that basically connects that whole thing, like how we were talking about in the beginning. All these various different civilizations are Ethiopian, inclusive of northern and southern India. You know what I'm saying? At that particular at a particular time or whatever case may be. A lot of the motifs that you have in northern India in your Vedic culture and everything like that, they transplants from Egypt and the Near East in the Levant region. You see what I'm saying? I think, we made that apparently clear, or the author more so than myself has really made that apparently clear. Um, from the language, studying a lot of the mythology and kind of going in that and comparing a lot of things or whatever case may be. So it's safe to say that based on the dates and everything like that, the dates and the stories that they tell in the language and everything like that, most of what they talking about in the Vedas period, it's a reworking of things that happened in Egypt. That's the stories that they tell. I'm not saying that they don't have their own unique culture as far as what developed over time or whatever, but what I'm saying is in its inception, it wasn't some unique thing. It's a continuation of some stuff that was started in Africa. So I know y'all rolled with me pretty much about 2 hours with this. I appreciate the love, appreciate your patience. I know you may have to rewind it a couple of times. That wasn't really one of the more entertaining ones. That one was pretty much just to get that on wax so that you can watch that a couple of times and kind of go back and kind of look at some of that and see some of the points that we were making in regards to, like, the Vedic Aryans and everything like that coming out of your Hyksos of Egypt, your Zoite Hyksos. But that's all I got for today, man. I appreciate y'all checking me out. Appreciate the love. Peace.